Okay, well, here's the tutorial for the pajama pants, and I know some of you are going to be doing the pajama shorts, but basically it's going to be about the same. So here's our pattern. We're going to be working with 9871, and this is simplicity. It's easy, and you can see that there's a boy and a girl on the cover, and that's just because they're standard set, so you can use it for either gender. So here's the back of the pattern. You should start off by measuring yourself so that you know whether you're going to need a extra small, small, medium, large, or extra large, and it lets you know basically what fabric amount you're going to need to purchase. We went through this in class, so this won't be new to any of you. The back of the pattern will also tell you what you might need extras, sort of like the notions. Right here it lists threads, and you're also going to need an elastic. So here's the fabric I'm going to be making my pants with. It's brown, butterfly. I'm quite excited about the way it's going to turn out. While I'm at it, I'm also going to make a PJ dress for my daughter, and she's excited about that too. So I did her measurement, so I know how much fabric I'm going to need for her garment as well. So this is a fabric that I'm going to be making my daughter's pajama dress with. So I'm taking this over to the washer and the dryer, and as you can see, there's my fabric ready to go. And you're going to want to pre-launder your fabric before you make your garment, and what that's going to do is it's going to pre-shrink it for you. That way, if you have any issues with shrinkage, it's going to happen before you make your garment and not after you make the garment, because you don't want it to shrink after you make it. Then the hem's all wrong and short, and so that's not ideal. So if you're going to wash this in hot water and dry this in the dryer, then you're going to want to do that now and allow it to shrink. Okay, so these are the pieces you're going to be working with. You've got the back of your envelope, you've got your tissue paper pieces, and you've got your instruction sheets. So this is what you get with every pattern that you purchase. A lot of information here, here, and here. So before you start any pattern, it's really good if you go through and read it all, like from beginning to end, and it basically will give you an idea if you're going to run into a problem or if there's something you're not going to understand. It may not make sense the first time you read through it, but trust me, when you go through it step by step, it's going to be nice to know what's coming up ahead. So here's the front of the instruction sheet, and this is the back of the instruction sheet. The front of the instruction sheet shows you the finished garment. It shows you how many pieces, and it starts talking to you about cutting and marking and the way you should lay it out. The back has numbered diagrams, and those diagrams and numbers go, they basically match up with numbers here that explain what's happening in each of these pictures. It comes in 3 different languages, so luckily you don't need to read all of that because you only need English. So this is how you're going to lay out your fabric and your pieces on your fabric. The fabric is double thickness, and you're basically going to be laying it out with the selvage edges here and here. There's the number 2, that's going to be used for the tie, and this is number 1. This is going to be your pant leg. You're going to cut 2 of these, and this part here, that's where you're going to be sewing to make the crotch. So this is going to be the hip waist area, and this taper down to the ankle. So this is, you're going to need pattern number 1 and pattern number 2. And it lists it here again. It says pants front and back and the drawstring. So after you've taken your measurements and you know what size you're going to need, you're going to use paper scissors, and you're going to cut your tissue paper out on whichever marking it is that you have decided that you need. So if it's extra large, large, medium, small, or extra small, you're going to cut along the lines that have that letter right in front of them. And it might be a good idea for the first time you're doing something like this to use a highlighter and actually trace that out first, so that way when you're cutting it, you're not going to make a mistake. So here's my tissue paper. It's all stretched out on the table, and I'm getting ready to cut, and I'm using paper scissors because, again, as we know, we don't want to use fabric scissors to cut paper. though I have to admit cutting tissue paper with fabric scissors is not that big of a deal, but still it's better to err on the side of caution. So here I am cutting along the lines of my pattern. And when you get to a notch, I should say, when you get to a notch, you want to cut it out in the same shape if it's a single. If it's a double or a triple, you want to kind of go along and then just go up and around. It saves you a lot of time. Some people like to cut in to the fabric, into the seam allowance, but it can be a problem sometimes if you need to give a little extra on your pattern after the fact, or if you have any problems with trying to keep a consistent seam allowance. This is much better to cut them out this way. So here are my two pattern pieces, and as you can see, they're really wrinkly. So what I'm going to do is take it over to the ironing board and I'm going to press it. I'm not going to use any steam. I'm going to use a light iron. So here you can see it's nice and flat, and I'm laying it out on my fabric. Now the fabric is not exactly the way the instructions had recommended. The instructions recommended 2 layers of fabric and as a double thickness, and normally when you lay that out, then you would lay it out with your 2 pretty sides together, but since we're going to be working with very long bolts of fabric, and some people are making shorts and some people are making pants, and we're probably going to have to kind of bring it up here for the length of the hem, we want to try to save as much fabric as possible. As you know, I like to be thrifty, so I'm laying it out in a single thickness, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'll show you in the other pictures to try to reduce the amount of waste. So the first thing is I'm going to lay it out and I'm going to line it up with the top edge of my fabric. So as you can see here, I'm saving myself 1 cut. So here's my selvage edge, and I'm going to measure from this guideline, and this guideline wants to be parallel with my selvage edge. So as you can see, it's 22 inches from that marking to my selvage. So I'm going to measure down to the other end of that same marking, and I'm going to make sure that it's 22 inches as well. And once that's parallel, I'm going to pin it down. Now when you're pinning a pattern piece, it's probably best for your first time, or even just a good habit to get into, to put your pins parallel before you're going to cut it. So pinning it parallel. I kind of get into this habit of always pinning them this way. This is much better for when you're sewing, but it's better to, as I said, parallel pin it for cutting. The reason is that way when you're cutting along, if that pin's hanging out a little bit, you don't run the risk of just catching the edge of that with your scissors and ruining your scissors or your rotary cutter. So here is my pattern piece. It's all laid out and pinned down, ready for cutting. And I'm going to use fabric scissors, and I'm going to cut out my pattern piece. And as you can see here, I have cut out that little notch. And then what I'm going to do is, because I need 2 pattern pieces, right, 2 pieces of fabric I should say, I'm going to lay what I've just done face down on top of another piece of fabric. So now I'm going to create like a sandwich. So this is a piece I've cut out. There's the tissue that I used to cut that pattern piece out, and here's the next piece of fabric I need to cut out. And as you can see, the pretty sides are facing each other with that tissue paper as a sandwich in the middle. Again, this is not the way the instructions said to do it, but we're going to save some fabric this way. So here I have, again, the pretty sides together, and I've pinned it to the one underneath, so nothing's going to move around on me. And once I've got it all nice and secure, I'm going to go around and I'm going to pin the whole thing securely to this large piece, so it's going to be ready for cutting as well. And as you can see, there's the pant leg, and it's lining up really nicely with my last cut, so I'm going to save all of that fabric because there's no waste. So I'm pinning it down here, and I'm just snipping it out, and I'm going to make sure I make all those little cuts for all my notches. So there you have it. I've got 2 cut out pant legs, and what's really important here is, again, the pretty sides are facing each other, because if you don't do that, it's going to be kind of like your mitten project, where you end up with